Hey YouTube, Shadol Latimer here again. And this is a follow-up video to the previous video I made that was about how to book your own tour, how to book a tour. I'm home from the tour, I finished it about a week and a half ago. I still don't have my voice 100% back, but please excuse me for that. But anyway, in this video, I wanted to uh, go over some loose ends, some things I didn't go over in the previous video. So the first thing is with touring, you definitely shouldn't tour just for the sake of touring. You really need to have a purpose, a reason for why you need to tour. Now, traditionally, uh, musicians would tour because, like, you probably released an album or whatever. You have some new material, and you need to go out to support it or expand your fan base. So you go on tour, um, and there's other reasons. Like in my case, uh, it was mainly to, well, yeah, I guess it was to expand my fan base originally. Now it's a different reason. Um, and for most musicians, it's a different reason than that now, because the fact of the matter is, like, recording just selling music doesn't pay anymore. Um, now, like, back in my day, there was something called CDs. uh, and so, back then, it was no problem for me to sell a CD for 15 bucks, at a gig. That was like pretty much going rate, sell your CDs for 15 bucks. Had them available online through Amazon and some other stuff, other places. But, um, and then things went to iTunes downloading, and so I went from making about, 13 to 15 bucks per CD to making, like, depending on what country the download came from, like anywhere between 67 to like 89 cents per download out of a 99-cent download. Then streaming came out, Pandora, Spotify, and all that, and I went from like 67 cents or 89 cents or whatever. I went down from that to fractions of a penny. Where I would need like 1,000 downloads or 3,000 downloads to make 1 cent. Uh, and that's everybody. I mean, so unless you're a megastar and you have millions of followers or hundreds of thousands or anything like that, where they stream you and you can then you'll actually see something appreciable back. So now a lot of musicians tour uh, as a source of income, especially if you've saturated your area. So that would be another reason to tour. Like, let's say you've built up a pretty good fan base where you already are, and you're just kind of out of places to play. Well, now it's time to expand out and reach some other markets. So um, that would fit me a little bit. When I first started touring, I had I had an album. Well, actually, no. Before I even had the album, I was touring, and I was touring really because I had saturated my area with what I was doing. Like, I was doing live concerts, but on the additionally, I came up with an educational presentation that I do for kids or adults, and it started taking off for me, and I ran out of places to do it where I lived on Long Island. So I expanded out to New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Connecticut and upstate New York and stuff like that, and it got bigger, so I ran out of places again. So I started going more south to the Carolinas and more north to like New Hampshire and so on and so forth. Next thing you know, I was doing it nationwide. Um, And so that, that was the reason then. Now now I the reason I did this last tour that I did the video for was simply because I needed to pay my property taxes for my house. So I force I mentioned I do web development now, and I spend a lot of time doing it freelancing, but I've recently I've had a couple of jobs. One was with a startup that went under, and I had a 3-month contract with them, developing. And then there was another company I worked for a while. I liked that job, but an hour and 20-minute commute one way. After about a year, I'm like, you know what? Plus, my back was killing me from it, from that commute. So anyway, so when things slowed down from freelancing, I was like, you know what? I better book a tour, because in a few months, I'll hit a slow season. So it'd be a perfect time to do a tour. So I did, and I paid my taxes, and now I'm good. So yeah, so if you're going to tour, you need to have a reason. Now, if you're gonna tour because you're trying to expand your fan base, then you need to have a game plan on how you're gonna do that. Like what I did, like what back then. Okay, things were different back, several years ago than they are now. Like back then, and especially the demographics of my fan base, the people that listened to me, they were usually older than me. So like, they depended on email quite a bit. So I made a huge effort to signing as many people as I could to my email list. All right. So I could keep in touch and let them know when I'm playing around them again. And that's the key, playing around them. So what I did was, aside from getting their name and email address, I got their zip code. Because look, I mean, think about it. Put yourself in their shoes. Do you really want to know when someone is performing in Arizona if you live in New York? I mean, it has no bearing on you. So, so I had two kinds of emails that would go out. One was a general email news, like, maybe I have a sale on my CD, or whatever generalized thing I had going on. And then I had the more specific thing that had to do with, if you lived in a certain area of radius within a zip code, if I was going to perform or do a presentation or, whatever. Now, of course, social media is the king of the day. So, you have to have an understanding of how to use that tool. So anyway, so yeah, if you're doing it to expand your fan base, make sure you do what you need to be able to keep in touch with them, because it does good to go through the trouble of booking a tour, ending up God knows how many miles from where you live, and maybe picking up some people that dig you, and then they never hear from you again. or you have no means of communicating with them to let them know you might be around again, so or that you have a new recording on Spotify or whatever, or I don't even know if iTunes is around anymore. Last I heard they were closing shop or changing or something. I don't know. Anyway, I think you get my drift. So the other thing is tools to help you with booking a tour. And I mentioned in passing in the other video, database. Yeah, that's hugely important. And in fact, quite frankly, I would not ever have had as many gigs as I do, or have had, on any tour, or just any time, I was at home doing gigs around, where I live or whatever. I would not have had not even a third of the gigs I had if it wasn't for the fact that I kept track of everything on a database, not a spreadsheet, a database. So, and I learned that lesson in college actually. um, when I was when I was in my last year of college, and it was also the what do you call it? It was the year I decided to. Well, actually, no. I started music in '98, and I started using the database around 2000, because what happened was I had a temporary. I did a 2 week stint as a telemarketer, and but I learned right there they use databases and they keep track of their conversations. They keep track of who needs to be called, stuff like that. I was like, man, this would be a really useful tool for booking gigs. And so when I that was probably the last job I had before I became a full-time musician. But um so the first thing I did was, once I you know got out of that job, I found a database to use, and I used that to enter in all the contacts as I would find them, for venues, or whether it was for local gigs or eventually to start booking tours. And I made sure the database, like, I looked at the functionality that was most useful at the job I had, which was a the databases were allowed you to keep notes on conversations. Okay, so I made sure I was able to keep notes on whatever I talked about to whoever. And then the other thing was even more important to me was the notifications. You could set reminders of, well, you need to call this person in 2 weeks, or in another week, send them an email. Maybe tomorrow, send them the contract, or what. But the database would have a pop up on my screen, or send me an email saying, hey, you need to do this. Of course, now, not only that, I get push notifications on my phone or whatever. So, so you need to have a tool, a database, that will keep you organized in doing, in booking the gigs. Because, you can try to write stuff down. I tell you what, especially if it comes to booking a tour. I mean, that might work okay if you're just doing some gigs around town or something like that. But if you're booking a tour, you will be making a lot of phone calls. A lot. This last tour I did, I had 30 gigs. It was 30 days, 30 gigs, but I didn't actually gig every single day. I gigged really hard the first 2 weeks, had a week off, and then the third week, was a finish up kind of thing. But I had now, so for those 30 gigs, which were 28 different venues, because a couple of those places I had 2 gigs in one venue. But all right, so for those 30 gigs, you know how many phone calls I made to different places to get those 30 gigs? And how many times I called one place to get one gig? I mean, I actually do have the numbers on that. I should probably at sometime like try to do a screen share so you can see some of my numbers or whatever. But I believe, if I remember correctly, that I had made a little over 360 phone calls for the gigs, but it wasn't 360 venues. It was, I think, 102 venues. Yeah. I don't know. I would need to look at the numbers. I'm trying to go off of my memory, but the point is, you're gonna be making a lot more calls and to a lot more places than what you're gonna end up with. And if you're gonna try to write all that down, good luck. And especially if you're gonna try to remember it, or remember to go back and look on the notebook. And no. Use a database. Let technology be your friend. So anyway, this is a little bit longer than I intended it to be, so I will shut up. Hopefully this will help you, whoever watches this, as the other video hopefully will help. And I'm always available for questions or send me a message or comment or whatever. I'll try to answer best I can. And with that, catch you later.